To those who don't know me, my name is Christina Marie-Noel. I'm a marketing strategist and business coach, and I specialize in working with mission-driven organizations and founders to cut through the clutter and grow their businesses. And I'm so excited you all joined today. In addition to my marketing work, I am also the founder of the FYSO Accelerator, which stands for Figure Shit Out. And FYSO is actually the first accelerator that creates a safe space for founders to test their ideas, hone their business models, and figure their shit out in community. So today we're going to talk about the 10 things you need to be thinking about to build and grow your business. I'm super excited to dive into this. We have an hour, so we're going to kind of scratch the surface on a lot of this, but it still should be a good foundation to start asking the right questions. And then beyond that, I'm going to give you a behind the scenes look into how the FYSO Accelerator works. And then last but not least, I'm pretty sure we're going to have time for questions. However, if anything comes up in the meantime, feel free to, I think if you you click participant and you can raise your hand, or you can chat and somebody just let me know. Sometimes I can get into like speaking. I'm gonna have you all help me to make sure that I acknowledge anything or questions that come up, because we can do that as we go. I'm pretty flexible. Does that all sound good? Yes, I see head nods. Okay, excellent. Let's go ahead and dive in. So today we're gonna break it into 3 key areas. We're gonna talk about the foundation of a really strong business. Then we're going to talk about how do you build a strong business, and then last but certainly not least, how do you then, once you have a business that you want to grow, how do you grow it? So first things first, you need a foundation, because like a house or a building, when the foundation isn't stable, you're kind of working on less than solid ground. I created this 5P system, which is super nerdy. For those that don't know me, this is nerdy, I'm pretty nerdy, but I love frameworks. And I started realizing that the things that I think are most important from a foundational standpoint all started with P, and then 1 or 2 I was able to make work. And if you're thinking the 5 Ps that might sound familiar, you might be thinking of the 4 Ps of marketing. In marketing, there's 4 Ps. It's price, product, place, and promotion. This is different. This is truly about, from a strategic standpoint, what do you need to think about when creating a business? So we're going to go through the 5 Ps. First things first, personal goals. What does success look like to me? I work in the purpose-driven space. So I work with a lot of mission-driven organizations, and there's also a lot of thought leaders that will tell you to start with why. However, why are you building your organization? But I think it's really important to start with yourself and to think about, what is your vision for your life? What are your strengths? What are you passionate about doing? And then beyond that, then what does success look like in the long term for you financially as well? And so when starting your business, I'm a huge believer in taking time to reflect on what it is you're setting out to do, because it's an incredible framework for thinking about where do you want to go. And so as you're building your business, or as you're forming this idea and implementing it, you can begin to think, is this going to get me to where I want to go? Is the growth going to get me to where I want to go? Will this eventually be able to pay my bills? Or is what I'm working on going to be a side hustle, for example? And different people are going to have different goals. Some people are going to prioritize wanting to own a business and having flexibility. And so your business model might look different from someone that's just like, I am so passionate about this one thing. I am hell-bent on serving a customer that doesn't have a lot of money, but I don't care because it's my passion, and I'll find other ways to make money. Those are 2 different goals, and that's okay. There's no wrong answer here. It's just, if you don't know where you're going, and also see where doing this and starting there, you can find product founder fit. A lot of people don't talk about that, but a really good example of product founder fit is say you might want to own a storefront. That's your dream, but you're really introverted and don't like being around people. you might not have product market fit. And so it's important to take the time to be really honest and know yourself so you don't find yourself stuck and ending up in a situation where you're not happy. I've also seen entrepreneurs grow their companies and get to a place where they're really not happy. And if they'd taken the time up front, they would have been a lot more set up for success. So then moving on from your personal goals, then we dive into purpose. So I am a big advocate for why. So first off, you think about your own personal why and where you want to go. And then we dive into the why are you creating a business? Why does it exist? Many of you might have seen the famous TED Talk from Simon Sinek, Start With Why, where he talks about the fact that people don't care about what you do, they care about why you do it. What kind of value does your business create? Why does it exist? And why should we even freaking care? Because it should be compelling. Beyond that, I personally, based on my experience working with more than 30 mission-driven organizations, I don't think that purpose is just this like nice to have, a feel-good thing. I think it's actually a really strategic advantage. It grounds people, it creates a compelling story, and then more important than that, it invites people to be part of your story. You are more likely to have engaged employees. I mean, from an employee standpoint, and even as a business owner standpoint, we spend more time at work than we do with our families and friends. And so why shouldn't the work that we're doing not have a positive impact, if that makes sense? And so purpose is so freaking important. This photo is actually of Bull City Burger and Brewery. I know we've got a lot of people from the Triangle on this call, and I'm a huge fan of what they do because they're if you've never been, they sell amazing burgers and amazing beer, and everything is grass-fed, and their ingredients are not processed or never frozen. But the why for Seth, the owner, Seth Gross, was that not only did he want a place where he could take his family to eat, to have like amazing food, he also wanted to create a company that would allow people to have a career in the restaurant industry. And so he pays living wages, and the way he runs his business limits his impact on the environment, and he's created this community around what he does. So first things first, you can go there and get an amazing burger and fries and beer, but beyond that, I've seen evidence that his story also spreads, and that there's power in the culture that his business has created and in the impact in the community that still is there to support him, especially now in these trying times. On to the next P, profit. This is often, I'm sure in light of everything, a lot of us have profitability on our minds. It is so important to, as business owners, think about our profit models. And this is where things can sometimes get dicey, because this is where vision versus reality can sometimes get a little challenging. What is the best and most sustainable business model for your organization? And tied to that, and we're going to go into this in a little bit more depth, is who are the customers that are going to allow you to have the most sustainable business model? When it comes to determining what profit model is reasonable, it's helpful to look at your industry. Just different industries have different percentages that you can expect that within that industry, based on how expensive it is to create your product, especially if you're in a products business, versus services. It might be more about what kind of talent do you need to invest in order to make your services possible. Or if it's just you and you're building a life and a business that creates the life you want, then it's more about what kind of customers are going to give you the right amount of take home that create a sustainable profit and stability for you. One thing I do advise is to consider talking to a financial advisor. At the end of the day, there's the high level strategy piece of, hey, if I make these projections and I kind of look towards what's been successful before and where I can expect to go and how much I'm expecting customers to pay me, and really what is my net profit versus others. And overall, profitability, it does matter. You should have a sustainable and scalable model, at least in some capacity. And also, one thing that's worth mentioning is cash flow as well. In times like these, we live and die by cash flow. So I have my MBA, and the one thing that never came up, shockingly, while I was in my grad degree, getting my grad degree, was cash flow and how cash is king right now. And so you also have to think about how, like, what are sources of cash? Are your, are the organizations that you work with able to pay you? And then how can you make sure that you create a sustainable business? So now we are getting into positioning. Is one of my favorite P's. Okay, I guess I kind of like them all, but as a marketer, positioning is like near and dear to my heart. Positioning is all about what makes you and your company different. I also think it's a huge part of building a business that is sustainable. By being different, you can often command a higher price, and it also creates a higher value for what you do. So I have a great story about positioning that happened to me a few years ago, where I took the leap into entrepreneurship. I was beginning to freelance full time, which is, a pretty rocky time and pretty stressful time. And then as life would have it, my car died. It didn't completely die, but I had, those jumper cable things. I had to use it like 3 times a day. And anytime I turned on my car, I wasn't sure if it was going to work. So I got very good at jumping it, but I knew that this was not like a long-term solution. And so we decided we needed to buy a car. My husband and I were working to start a family. And so I knew that I wanted a larger car. Before now, I had a Volkswagen Jetta. And so I knew I wanted to get a mid-size SUV because I kind of have a bad back already. Don't judge. But in light of that, I started doing my research. I looked at mid-size SUVs. I started looking at the recommendations that are out there. And the clear #1 winner, at least at the time, was the Honda CR-V. I had many friends with it. Many people love the Honda CR-V. There's nothing wrong with the car. It is arguably best in class. However, I did have some friends talk to me about the fact I needed to check out Subarus. And I was like, okay, noted. Subaru sounds kind of intriguing. If you start looking at their branding, it's pretty unique. It's rugged and sporty. And one friend literally said, she's like, yeah, I have a friend who everyone in their family owns a Subaru. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a cult level obsession. So we go out, we hit the lot, we're driving out, we're going to test out the cars. We got in the Honda CR-V. It was fine. It was really nice. It was best in class. It was very reliable. However, we went to Subaru, and I knew within 5 minutes I was sold. They position their product really uniquely. So Subaru, everything that they sell is 4-wheel drive. That's how they come. They just do not bend on that. Whereas at other places, you have to spend more money on investing in a 4-wheel drive. Subaru's whole thing is that you can go anywhere, and that, that's the kind of vehicle that's going to take you there. And I was a little nervous about, I really care about how a car drives. I was kind of bummed to go to an SUV. And so the minute I drove the car, I was already sold. On top of that, I love this. I still have this romantic idea that I'm going to go drive on the beach and camp on the beach. That is yet to be done. We will see. But I know I have the option. And the thing about Subaru is they're killing it. They've been steadily growing over the past 2 years. They're slowly gaining market share, and they're a great example of how positioning is powerful. So depending upon your business and your market, you have to think about how to position yourself. So that can be anything from finding what we typically refer to as a niche. So for example, my niche is I typically work with mission-driven entrepreneurs. I like working with companies with a mission, and I use traditional marketing and strategy and business coaching to help them succeed, but I help them do that while staying true to the purpose. Other people, it might be that they're going to have just their own brand, which we're going to talk about more later. So they might do what everyone else does, but they're going to do it in their own way, in their own voice, with their own attitude, or you may be able to, within your market, find a unique customer. So like Subaru found me. Subaru spoke to me. Even though I'm a little high maintenance, I still like to think I'm sporty, or maybe I want to be sporty. So the question is, can you look at a market and see, is there a customer that's being ignored or that's not being serviced well? I will say that in some way, having a strategy where you are different or where you find opportunities to stand out and be different is powerful. And now that takes us to last, but certainly not least, the 5th P, which is perception. How do people view you? At the end of the day, business is about trust. When people buy your products or services or come to your store, they're going to try to figure out, can we trust you? Can we trust you with our hard-earned money? Can we trust you with our investment? Why is your business the one we should choose? Or why are your product services the ones we should choose? And the good news is there's some levers you can use to help people trust you. The one thing that's pretty obvious is warranties or money-back guarantees. It's pretty nice to know if you buy it and it breaks, or if you buy it and you're disappointed, you can get out of the contract. That's a pretty good indicator of value. The next thing that you can check out or try is free trials. So I grew up going to Clinique, and I just think about all of the free trials they used to give me when I was growing up. Also, there's like a whole psychological thing where when you give people gifts, they feel obligated to give them in return. Maybe a little manipulative, but at the end of the day, I think people make choices that if they want something, they will eventually invest. If you are in the services business, creating a lot of content that helps demonstrate your expertise, that adds value, and it really begins to build a relationship. That's a really powerful way to give back and to begin building a relationship. Then I also recommend case studies. So for service providers, case studies are one of the most powerful things you can do to show, not just tell, what you do and demonstrate the kind of value you can create. And that I was interviewing this one data visualization company that's a B Corp out of Canada, and they shared with me that the only marketing that worked for them was literally case studies, because they served nonprofits. They didn't really understand what data visualization was, but the minute that they saw case studies, they were like, oh, you can do that? You can take this data and turn it into something really compelling that's going to connect with our donors and make more money. So it's a great example of show, not tell. But then the most important piece of perception, hands down, is customer testimonials or customer reviews. At the end of the day, I can say what I want to about me, and you're never going to believe me like you're going to believe somebody that's purchased from me, or somebody that's used my product, or somebody that's invested in my service and was really happy. Testimonials are extremely powerful. That's why Yelp is what Yelp is, or Google reviews are so, I mean, anytime I go anywhere, I'm always looking at Google reviews. Beyond that, for small business owners, it is estimated that 80 to 90% of your referrals come from word of mouth marketing. And that really gets us to, and it's a great transition into what we're about to talk about, which is how do you build a company? If you have an amazing product or service that people want to talk about, and you blow people's minds, so they have an expectation, and you go above and beyond that, that is a recipe for success. So just to recap what we talked about, we just discussed the 5 foundational pieces, or really the 5 Ps of a great business. They were, what are your personal goals? So why are you doing what you're doing? Where do you want to go? What is your business's purpose? So why does it exist? What value does it create? Then this is where I get nervous and I'm going to start forgetting what I told you. I love that I'm like, what's the 3rd P? And I literally have, it's fine. I'm going to remember the 3rd P.
Profit.
I'm moving on to profit. Yes. Oh, I love that I'm a business coach and I forgot that profit was the 3rd P. Y'all. So then profit, you need a profitable business model. 4th is perception, or 4th is positioning, and then last but certainly not least is perception. How do people view you? All right, thanks again, On. So how do you then build a company and learn what you need to learn to develop those foundational elements? And that's where building comes in. And building, when I look at how do you build a company or how do you build a new product or service, I think of it all around insights and research. And so we're going to talk about, the next two things we're going to talk about are forms of research. So first things first, this might seem obvious, but I do have some tips that could be unique, is competitive insight. You should know your industry. You ideally should have competition. I am going to put like a quick, there is an exception. You could be doing something that's completely original, right? Like there was not Spanx before Spanx existed, or at least not on anybody's main radar. However, it's worth noting, if you're doing something completely game-changing, just note that it will probably take longer and it's a longer journey because you're going to be gaining awareness and creating a market. It doesn't mean it's not possible. It's just note that it's more challenging. And it's just going to be a different approach. For most of us, we're going to be competing with someone. So if you own a storefront, you might be competing with Amazon. Or if you are in the services business, you might be competing with other similar services businesses. So in my case, I'm really a marketing consultant. And when I was starting out, I, number one, looked at the marketing agency landscape because they're arguably my competitors. I wanted to look at what's out there. How are people getting their marketing services? And one thing that I did, and this is kind of like a behind the scenes tip, is I actually talked to my competitors. So I interviewed 3 different agency owners of some form and asked them a bunch of questions. Granted, they were not strangers. I think it can be off-putting to some people if you don't know them, to be like, hey, can I just pick your brain even though I'm a stranger and I want all of your trade secrets that you learned over the last, 5 to 10 years of your life. Don't do that. Build a relationship first, then talk to your competitors. But in my case, I had volunteered with many of them, or one I knew from high school. And in all of these cases, so in all 3 conversations, I learned things that actually did save me years of time. And that gave me insane insight that I would never have gotten otherwise. And I asked them questions like, what did you wish you knew before you got started? What are common pitfalls in your industry? What's the most important skill set I should be developing, or what service should we be offering to fill the market need? If there's one piece of advice you would give to someone that's starting their business, what would it be? For me, I learned a ton. It was a game changer. And I also thought a lot about why would my competition talk to me? In certain industries, there might be such heated competition, it's not possible. But in this case, I think they realize that there is space. There's space for me to exist. And if I'm doing this right, I'm going to probably position myself in a way that's unique. I'm likely going to go after a different customer, or I'm likely going to pivot. And so them helping me didn't in any way detract from their ability to thrive. Beyond that, other ways to get competitive insight is to look at the market, look at how they talk about themselves, look at what customers they serve, and just really understand how do things work. And also, I love this, what assumptions are going to be made by your customers when they hear that you are a fill in the blank. So in my case, I have really struggled with being a consultant or a coach. I've been a consultant my entire career, but at least in the context of FYSO and a lot of the work I do with small business owners, I'm really more of a coach. And it took me a few years to get to the point where I started calling myself a coach, because the assumptions made about being a coach are different than the assumptions being made about a consultant. And this all goes to, again, what is the game you're playing? And choosing the right positioning and the right ways of talking about yourself and the right ways of comparing yourself to competitors is really, really valuable, because it reduces, you never want your customers to be confused. If they are, they're probably just going to get confused and back away, and now you've lost an opportunity. Next thing, and this is where things get really fascinating, is customer research. Some businesses, you're going to have customer research all the time in doing what you do. So for example, if you're a photographer or if you own a storefront, you're going to see your customers all the time. In your case, you're pretty much set. Granted, I would always be talking to them and trying to understand, why did you choose us? Why do you come here? You know, what things are on your mind? What pain points do you have? On the other hand, if you're in the services business or you're building like a technology product, customer research is going to be very likely make or break for you, especially as you try to determine what customer is the best fit for your business to serve. And I have seen so many businesses waste months and sometimes years of their lives because they didn't do proper customer research. And here's why. People lie. That might sound obvious and also might sound a little harsh, but there's a good reason for them doing so. People want to be nice. They want to encourage you. Nobody that you're going to talk to is ever going to want to like just stomp on your hopes and dreams. However, given that, you have to be really careful in how you perform customer research, because if you're not careful, you're going to set someone up to be really nice and lie to you and potentially give you data that isn't useful. So what is one to do? How do you do customer research that works? I'm going to give you a totally this is arguably the most valuable thing you will hear on this webinar if you haven't heard of it yet. There's a book, it's called The Mom Test. Buy it. And it's written by a guy who's part of multiple startups, some that succeeded and some that failed. And in the tech world, it's pretty well known, if you're building a startup, you're supposed to talk to customers. And yet, in all of these cases, the ones that succeeded and the ones that failed, they talked to customers. And yet, one of them failed. And so that's when the author, Rob Fitzpatrick, realized that essentially they were getting bad data. And so this book is an amazing resource that gives you instructions on how to do better customer research. What it teaches you is like the number one, just so you have it on this call, the number one thing you need to talk to customers about is what is their pain point. If you want to give them some instruction, be like, hey, if you're interviewing mothers, you could say, if you're going to try to do let's say a baby product, moms, what's your biggest pain point in your baby's health? Or in, some specific, in baby clothes. And then you want to leave it. You want to leave it really broad, and you want to shut your mouth and let them say what they're going to say. Sometimes when this happens, you're going to find that someone has no pain point in the area that you're going to work on, and that is fine. Typically, when you're interviewing these customers, it takes 10 to 15 minutes. If they're not your customer, it's not a big deal. It just means they're not your customer. And if they're not your customer, just thank them and let them go. Say, oh, okay, this is so great. Thank you so much for talking to me today. This is really helpful. Because it's data, right? You've learned about someone who's not your customer, which is still helpful. If you do have someone that has a pain point around the area that you work on, then you can dive in and ask follow-up questions like, how do you manage this problem that you have? Because eventually you need to figure out, is it enough of a problem that they're willing to make an investment to solve? Customer research is all about pain points. And really, our job as entrepreneurs is to solve problems. If we solve the right problem, that's how we build a successful business. The one thing to think about, I heard this amazing metaphor from an entrepreneur, and he said, one thing you need to think about when you're starting your business is, are you a vitamin or are you a painkiller? Vitamins are nice to have. There are certainly businesses that are vitamins that still thrive. It doesn't mean you have it's impossible. But if you can be a painkiller, that is going to be a game changer for your business. If you can solve someone's pain point, then you don't have this obstacle you have to get over. You don't have to convince them. They have a pain, you have a solution, and they're going to want you to solve it. And that's great. Okay, so doing customer research, I actually recommend, when possible, to interview as many people as possible. The ways you can do this is to talk to your friends and family, mean, you truly can just ask for introductions. Or one time I was in a startup weekend, really dorky. It's when a bunch of entrepreneurs all come together and spend a weekend starting businesses. And the one that I participated in, we built a wireless leash for kids. And the way that we were able to do customer research is we went to a park. So this is done in like one weekend over a few hours. We went to this park and we just talked to moms and we're like, what is your biggest fear with keeping track of your kids? And they were like, I am terrified my kid will run away. And so in a few hours, we were able to get a lot of validation. We asked questions about what kind of item would your kid wear? We found out that, because we were originally thinking we'd do a bracelet, but apparently at certain ages, they'll rip a bracelet off. And so we ended up developing like a more adjustable design. And the goal of these, and here's the one rule, is unless they ask, you do not tell them what you do. The reason why is the minute you tell them what you do, they're going to probably say nice things. And if you do, if they ask, hey, what are you working on? And you tell them at the end, that's fine. Just number one, don't treat them like a sales prospect. That's not the goal. Number two, if they say nice things, ignore it. Now we're going to dive into the third piece of building your business, which is where you can begin to figure out, are people lying to me or am I actually on something? Prototyping is essentially all it means is just creating some way to quickly test out, is something I'm hoping to launch, a new product or service or an idea that I have, will people pay for it? So a prototype can be anything from, I'm a service provider, so I'm going to create a one-pager and for a workshop and see if anyone signs up. It's going to take a lot less time and a lot less money to just quickly throw together a one-pager on Canva and send it out to my network and see if that works. Then spending spending months creating the workshop and developing the workshop and thinking about the workshop, and then nobody shows up. And that sounds really dramatic and obvious, but this happens all the time, if that makes sense. We get so excited about the ideas we're working on, it's so easy to skip over the validation process. Other things that can be prototypes are pop-up shops. So say you're thinking about opening a storefront or creating some kind of physical space, you can host pop-ups to see if people will actually show up if you build something. You can actually, once you get into the product space, you can create 3D printers, or you can create mock-ups. If you're going to do an app, you can create a mock-up of the app instead of spending a ton of money on development. That is also another disclaimer. If you're ever going to get in the tech space, be very careful and have done your research before you sink a ton of money into development. At some point, you have to eventually create the prototype, but so much money has been lost in moving forward with an idea before it's really been validated. The only validation for your business is money. When someone gives you money, that is validation. That's like a hell yes, I'm bought in. Money is it. No money, no business. Oh, and actually, speaking on that, one of the most interesting forms of arguably it's like the advanced prototyping is actually crowdfunding. If you think about it, you created a prototype, so you actually created like a physical product, you figured out, or service, you figured out how to package it and how to manufacture it. And then before you go and make that huge investment, you launch a crowdfunding campaign to see, are people going to buy it? You give them a deal for being first movers, so early adopters get a discount. But isn't that like such a powerful way to pre-sell your stuff compared to building this whole inventory and then nobody shows up? All right, so last but certainly not least, you have something to sell and now you're ready to grow it. By this point, ideally, you have taken the time to get feedback on the quality of your product or service. And now you're ready to spread the word. With growth, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about brand strategy and marketing. I love branding. Branding's fascinating because often when you think of a brand, you think of a logo. And yet branding is about so much more than that. Branding is about how your company makes people feel. What do people talk about it when you're not there? What is the experience? What is it saying to people? How does it feel? Is it super corporate? Is it really relatable? Is it casual? I mean, in my case, my brand's pretty edgy, at least in this context. And your brand, and this is something where I see founders get kind of stuck, your brand should match your audience. And that's why doing this customer research is so powerful. So for example, I do a ton of business coaching, but then sometimes I also work with corporate clients. I actually have a separate website for my corporate work because there's a different way that they like to be talked to and approached. Sometimes there's overlap, but still, it's okay to like differentiate how you show up and how you talk to people depending upon what type of customer you're talking to. Questions to think about for brand strategy. So how does it show up in the world? What is the first impression? How does your website look? How does the experience look? If you have a physical store, for those in the triangle, this is Sola Coffee. In light of social distancing, I'm really missing them. But there, I mean, you can even in this photo get a sense of the Sola brand. You can see their logo, but it's so much more than that. It's their logo on a retrofitted van that was turned into a bar with like some fairly, craft looking beers and then quirky stuff like a typewriter and an inspirational quote in the back. That is a vibe. It's a very specific vibe that appeals to a very specific customer. And it's creating the atmosphere that transcends the brand. And so when you're thinking about your brand, don't just think about the logo and the colors. Think about how you communicate and how it talks and how your experience works. Like, think about mapping out your customer experience all the way from your website through the end of your customer engagement and how you set expectations and how you ideally go above and beyond them. Because every piece of that process is a reflection of your brand. Last but certainly not least, marketing strategy. Do you have one? What does it look like? When I think marketing strategy, I think, what is the strategy you have in place to reach your target customer? The thing is, when I think about marketing strategy, I also think about it as a series of tests. Go back to when you're in high school in science class and running an experiment. That's how I treat marketing. I typically create a hypothesis about how I might want to talk to my customer, and then I'm just going to run an experiment, usually on a small scale, to see if it's going to work. With marketing strategy, and I just want to emphasize small scale. I have had heartbreaking conversations with business owners that, for example, have invested tens of thousands of dollars in print advertising, for example, because that's a traditional way to market. But it led to nothing. And so when you look at marketing, it's not just the channel, so like social media or print or events, for example. It's also, is the message that you're going to use going to resonate? Because if you don't have your messaging down, no amount of money that you spend on advertising is going to pay off if it's not going to connect. So, examples of marketing strategies. So in my case, one of the most powerful things I can do is to try to connect to people. I often, before the pandemic, I would host events, and I did really well with those because people would meet me in person and see I'm a real life human and how I work and decide for themselves, am I their cup of tea or am I not? For other businesses, it might be building a brand on Instagram. So this is a photo of Zen Succulent. They have a killer Instagram presence. And it just totally captures the vibe of their in-person experience. And for them, it's been a really effective avenue for connecting with their customers. The biggest thing is to test. So if you're going to test out Instagram, you need to give it a good try. You need to actually spend 30 to 90 days regularly posting, give it a shot, and see, are people responding? Are you attracting your ideal customer? What does it look like? Because at the end of the day, whatever your marketing is, what matters most is not the number of followers you have, it's whether or not it converts. And so I think as small business owners, I wouldn't have more than 3 experiments going at once. I think it's easier to start small and then build from there. And then once you get good on one platform, then you can think about how you show up on other platforms. But I'd rather you do one thing really well that's working for you than trying to do everything. Because come on, y'all, we have to be scrappy, or many of us do. I'm trying to think if there's anything I've missed with marketing strategy. I mean, it's obviously a loaded thing. Oh, I know the one point I didn't make is email lists. So the other thing, there's 2 things actually I have to say. Email lists, and I love it. I'm like, just so I don't forget, email lists and word of mouth marketing. So I'm going to say it again. So email lists, the downside of social media is it's controlled by algorithms, and different platforms are going to speak to different people. So if you're in the B2B business, LinkedIn is your playground. Be on LinkedIn all the time. If you're direct to consumer, it's probably, depending upon the age of your customer, it's going to be either Facebook or Instagram, which is owned by the same company now, all owned by Facebook. But those platforms are driven by an algorithm. And so at the end of the day, you don't own your followers, and the rules of the game can change. And when that happens, some of the shakeups that have happened on Instagram went from major influencers having an insane following to people not even seeing their posts. It's bonkers. In contrast, email marketing, you own your contacts, and even if you change platforms, you get to take them with you. Also, people read their emails. There's a whole new, and another channel can also become text. Text message marketing is a whole new thing. And then last but certainly not least, I know one of my marketing friends uses Facebook Messenger a lot because people are a lot more likely to engage. As a whole, you need to also think about your brand strategy. So you need to decide, are you comfortable with cold emailing people, or do you want something more organic? So would you prefer someone to opt into text so you can let them know when there's a new event coming up, right? I prefer that. When I get spam texts or spam emails that I didn't sign up for, I find it deeply annoying. And that, for me, detracts from their brand. The last thing is, we've talked about all the fancy marketing channels. At the end of the day, I just want to remind you, 80 to 90% of small business referrals come from word of mouth. So at the end of the day, I think having a marketing strategy that supports what you're doing is really, really valuable, and thinking about the right channels to do that. But the most important thing is creating an amazing product or service. And with that, I love this quote from Seth Godin. If you're not best in the world at what you do, then get better. And that really does hint at, take the time to understand what your product or service is and who it's for, and why it's the best for the customer you're trying to serve. Because at the end of the day, that's going to make everything else easier. And it's going to make marketing so much simpler, because you don't have to do the hard work. The people that love you and the customers that you serve really well are going to do the work for you. On that note, I'm going to give you a quick behind the scenes tour of how the FYSO Accelerator works. This is actually a photo from our pilot. So I did take my own advice. I had an idea. I ran a pilot. I admittedly probably should have interviewed more people before I even ran the pilot. See, when I say people make this mistake often, I am one of those people, right? People that have a bias towards action, it's so easy to dive in, and then you look up and you're like, it's been 3 months and I've done all this work. Should I have? Thankfully, I created the FYSO Accelerator because it's what I needed when I was building my business. So it is kind of helpful when you're your first and best customer. I really struggled with the loneliness of entrepreneurship, and really knowing it's hard when you're in a space and you become an expert on what you do to see the forest from the trees. We become such experts on what we're really good at that number one, it can become hard for us to market. Like even as a marketer, I sometimes struggle with my marketing because I know exactly what I'm talking about. And then I have to be careful to say, is what this says, does that make sense to who I'm trying to talk to? Beyond that, business strategy is challenging. There's so many different directions you can go and things you can prioritize. And if you work for yourself, whether that's side hustling or full time, let's be honest, like you only have so many hours in a day, you have limited resources. What are you going to spend it on? And for me, I knew the entrepreneurial process. I had done startup weekends, I had volunteered with them, I had my MBA in marketing and entrepreneurship. Like I know the steps, but if you're going through it alone, it just feels sad and lonely versus if you do it in community, it's so much more uplifting and powerful. And my theory and what the feedback that I've been receiving is by creating a safe space too. One thing that is challenging about building your business is you have your public face, right? You might say, I mean, yes, please be as authentic as you can. But still, as a business owner, you want to show up looking confidently. You want to be like, this is my product. I'm amazing at it. This is my expertise. This is how I serve. And then as a human, you might be like, is this right? Am I launching the right product or service? Am I spending my time in the right place? And so FYSO is about creating a safe space where you don't have to act like you know what's going on. You don't have to have all the answers. You can share the fact that you're struggling, and you can share the fact that, you know, they say entrepreneurship is a roller coaster because it is. We all go through it. We all have our ups and downs. And the one thing I can guarantee about entrepreneurship is you're going to have challenges you're going to have to overcome. And the question is, do you have the right support to help you get through them and to think clearly and to be strategic and to move forward? And if you fail, or really when you fail, because we all fail, that's also like inherent to this process. But when you hear stuff about entrepreneurship, everybody's like, fail fast, fail forward. And they make it sound sexy. But in all reality, failing hurts. It sucks. I don't think anyone wakes up and is like, man, I can't wait to fail today. On top of it, I'm a former straight A student. I'm like your classic, I've had to unlearn a lot of what school taught me, which is there often isn't a right answer. And you have to define your success. And you have to decide, was this a success or a failure? And if you are going in the wrong direction and have to decide to pivot, by having a vulnerable space, you're more likely to see what you need to see and shift your course sooner rather than later. On a more tangible note, what FYSO is going to look like. So this is the first time we're going 100% virtual. Also, it's going to be pay what you can, pay when you can. I know a pandemic has happened. I know times are really hard. I don't want anyone to not have to let finances be a barrier to getting support and accountability in community. So it's been so inspiring to see how people have reacted to that. There are people paying the full suggested price. There are also people paying less. And it's really just heartwarming to know that anything is okay. As far as logistics go, so before now, in the last official cohort, we did a kickoff weekend and we had a 6-month program where we checked in weekly. Now we're just going to take that weekend of content. I know that none of you want to sit on Zoom for a freaking weekend. I don't. So we're taking that content and we're breaking it out into 4 weeks. We're doing a short kickoff that'll be fun and all about team building and introducing you to the program on Sunday afternoon. And then on Mondays and Wednesdays for the month of June, that's when boot camp's happening. We're going to cover things like the 5 Ps that we just talked about, but going way more in depth. We're going to bring in a bunch of great speakers. We have Mari Casey. She founded Uncompany. So what's really neat about her is she's both a freelancer as well as the founder of what has now become a scaling agency. They have amazing clients like Lenovo, and then also I think it's Tupelo Honey. Don't quote me on that, but they've done some really amazing campaigns. Also, we have Megan French Dunbar. She's a co-founder of Conscious Company Media. They host a lot of amazing conference in the social impact space. and she's just a powerhouse. I cannot wait to interview her. And then last but certainly not least, and then there's probably more to come. We're working on it. We're still scrappy. Brendan Andrade. Actually, this is the back of Brendan's head. Brendan is one of my dear friends. He competed with me in Startup Weekend, and he's an expert in doing customer interviews. And so he actually had one of the highest rated sessions in our last cohort. He's amazing at teaching entrepreneurs how to actually do these interviews. And so he's going to be coming back and sharing his insight to help make sure that you're all set up for success. Then after that first month, we're then shifting into business as usual. So every week you'll have about an hour and a half commitment. Every other week, you're going to be meeting with your learning circle. That's going to be a group of 4 to 6 companies at a similar phase of their business. And we pair you up. You're non-competing. We have everybody sign NDAs, so it's truly a safe space. And in those meetings, it's kind of like mastermind style. So you'll check in. You'll each have a specific amount of time to talk about how your business is going and ask for support. Then every other week, I'm going to be sending out a piece of content that talks about things like the entrepreneurial operating system, the system for how I run my business. I love it. Customer personas, storytelling, community building, email marketing, social media marketing. So like a lot of the more granular things that you need to know as you want to build your business and grow it. We're going to be covering that over the next 5 months. And what's great is I will make it so I record those and you can watch them on your own time, and you can also refer back to them whenever you'd like. And then on those Monday nights, so for the rest of the program, it's Monday nights from 7:30 to either 8:30 or 9. On group coaching sessions, we'll have 3 hot seats where 3 people volunteer to get coaching in front of the group. A lot of those hot seats come from, we also, beyond that, like have an online Slack community for the whole cohort. And in it, we'll have a channel where you can literally ask for feedback as you go. You can be like, I have this ad, I'm thinking about doing this. Does it make sense? Or here's my business proposal. What do you think? And the group will actually give you feedback. And oftentimes I encourage anyone that does that to then join the hot seat. And then I will then coach you to fill in any blanks. If we have more speakers, because we've reached out, like our goal is to have many more speakers this year. We might also tack those on to some of these sessions because, again, that's just more value added to you. The thing is, though, the #1 benefit that you get from FYSO is community. It's a community that you can depend on, that gives you support and accountability. And oh, okay, sorry, I just got a question. Oh, because we're about to get into questions. And it's all about not having to do this alone. At the end of the day, you get to define what success means to you. And that, for different FYSO participants, has meant everything from one business owner decided to sell her business, all the way to another business owner launched a whole new brand all about accessibility awareness, and they're still working to develop an accessibility consulting practice. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, you get to do that, but you find your community. So with that, we're going to split. We do have some time for Q&A. Oh, actually, last thing. Early bird application deadline, May 1st. It's my birthday. It's on Friday. If you apply by Friday, then you get a one-on-one coaching session with me. And then the final application deadline is May 15th. Go to FYSOaccelerator.com. A lot of these details are on FYSO, on the webpage. That was actually one question I just got. And then I also am more than happy to answer any questions too. If I'm trying to think, most of the schedule's on there. Like it shows like what days and what times. It starts on May 31st and then it goes through 6 months. And then basically you apply. After you apply, we'll find time to hop on a call. And then if you're accepted, then we send you also all the details before you sign up. Any other questions? I know we have about 3 minutes. Yes, no, maybe? While I'm waiting, You still have time. The one thing I have not mentioned yet is everything we talked about today. There is a 101-page guide. You can go to bit.ly/FYSO guide. And so if you do want to DIY your entrepreneurial journey, that I literally created that book with the vision of, as I build FYSO, I know it's going to cost money. It may or may not always be pay what you can, pay when you can. We're going to see. It's an experiment. I still wanted to give a resource so people could be set up for success. So this guide, you do sign up for my e-newsletter. You get 5 emails that kind of point out the big picture. If after that you want to get off, I don't care. Like, this is meant to be a resource for you. But I definitely, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Also, we're on Instagram now, FYSO Accelerator. Also, I'm on Instagram. That's just my favorite platform. And LinkedIn, because I do some B2B work.
Thank you so much again for coming. Feel free to email me at hello@christinamarienoel.com if you have any questions or if there's anything that I might be able to do to help you. Thanks. I hope to talk to you soon.